ANC News 7 p.m. Here's another look at the headlines. President Arroyo and Vice President Noli de Castro file a counter-electoral protest against losing opposition Bets Fernando Poe Jr. and Lauren Legarda. The Labor Department plans to conduct an ocular inspection of Iraq, despite the POEA's statement that the ban on deployment of Filipinos in the war-torn nation stays. The kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas condemns the killing of another radio commentator in Batangas. And conjoined twins Carl and Clarence Aguirre are in stable condition following the final and most crucial operation to separate them. Speaking of children, 70 of them, aged 5 to 12 years old, were recently rescued from a child pornography syndicate in Laguna. This incident alarmed the United Nations Children's Fund over the growing incidence of child pornography in the Philippines. In most cases, these victims are never rescued. Several factors make the Philippines an easy prey for those who produce and use child pornography. Joining us tonight to talk about these factors and about this particular issue is the chief of the Child Protection Section of UNICEF Manila, Mr. Leopoldo Moselina. Good evening po and welcome to ANC.
Good evening. Thank you.
Okay. The report from UNICEF is very disturbing. On one hand, some people say we shouldn't be shocked. On the other hand, there are people who are disturbed by this because we are taught in school that the Filipino values the family above all and that the child is held precious. How is this kind of crime, child pornography, possible in a culture like this?
Well, in the first place, let's put it into proper perspective. I don't think child pornography is a monopoly in the Philippines. In fact, it has become a global concern. That's why the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child has particularly focused on this particular issue, among other forms of child abuse, exploitation, and violence. The Philippines has ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child, including the optional protocol on the sale of children.
So we do have laws against child abuse, child prostitution.
We do have also Republic Act 7610.
Trafficking in people and all sorts of laws. So where is the problem? Is it in enforcement of the law?
You're right. I think we still lag in terms of effective enforcement of existing laws.
Now, before we jump into enforcement, let's just define the term child pornography. What is the definition of child and what is the definition of pornography? Because I understand that there is really no clear definition of pornography, at least in Philippine law.
The child, if we go by the Convention on the Rights of the Child, is any person below the age of 18.
So pag 18 ka na, hindi ka na child?
That's right.
Okay, so this is
Based
17
yeah.
and younger.
Pornography is any form of representation of the child, whether real or simulated, in explicit sexual activities, for
showing it on
sexual purposes.
On photos,
yeah.
The internet,
videos, etc. So it's really making use of the child as a sexual object with the end in view of trying to gain profit from it.
So you say gaining profit from it, that means there's a market out there, that there are buyers and sellers.
Presumably.
Who is this market?
Yes. Well, we could not pinpoint exactly, but
baka mga foreigners to.
It's both foreigners and Filipinos.
Talaga? May Filipinos na nahihilig sa mga ganyan?
Those who were caught in the
Laguna raid
includes a foreigner and several Filipinos. The NBI has them in their custody right now.
The news reports that I've read, they haven't been identified.
I think NBI has them.
Oo, pero they haven't, and normally kasi, di ba, pag may mga nahuhuling kriminal, ini-splash yan sa mga headlines.
Right.
Nakalagay yan sa front page.
Right.
Bakit ito? Parang wala.
The investigation must still be ongoing. No? But the thing is, since this issue is very politically and culturally sensitive, that's why regular data collection systems of government or even non-government organizations would not include information along these lines. But the fact that this is happening is a cause for concern. And
Great
alarm.
alarm.
Yes. So we should not really be concerned about magnitude in this case.
But anyway, let me ask you, you talk about magnitude. How big is the problem? Do we have statistics?
Very preliminary. UNICEF has commissioned a study on child pornography.
Here in the Philippines?
Here in the Philippines. It's being undertaken by the Center for Development Studies, Integrative Development Studies of the University of the Philippines. But the study is still ongoing, so I would not want to preempt the findings of the study.
Could you give us at least a characterization of what the findings have been so far?
Well,
a general idea.
Just like the news report on the children who were rescued from the pornography ring in Laguna, no? So it's making use of children in pornographic materials. No? That is one form. The study has focused on certain locations like Puerto Galera, Angeles, Cebu. No? So we hope that the study will be finished by late August, early September, so that by the end of September we have the full report.
And this is by September?
That's right.
Okay. Now, are we saying, okay, you mentioned the internet, advanced technology. If I surf the internet right now, will I be able to find a website that features Filipino children in a pornographic nature?
I have not tried surfing the internet regarding pornographic
No, but anybody,
materials.
is it available on the internet?
I'm not sure. But there are websites
that are easy to access.
Yes, that are easy to access.
Now, dun naman sa mga na-rescue, tong 70 children na to, the age was between 15 and 12 or 15 and 16? 5 and 16 or 5 and 12? The reports have don't agree with each other.
Yeah.
Between 5 and
12.
And 12. So they're very young.
Yes.
These are really
very young.
Are they all girls?
The majority are girls.
So may boys din.
Yes.
Nako, has UNICEF been able to interview or speak with any of these children? Do you know what their condition is at this moment?
Our partners are taking care of them. UNICEF does not directly implement programs. We do provide technical assistance. We do our advocacy role. But in terms of direct interventions, this belongs to our government counterparts, DSWD, NGOs. So the children are now under the care of the Department of Social Welfare and Development, and they're provided psychosocial services.
Will these children be, at least, would you have access to them in the sense that could you interview them and include the findings in your UNICEF report?
The social workers
will do that, and then they will report to you. Okay, now, aren't there a lot of child advocacy groups in the Philippines?
There is a growing network of non-government organizations.
So it should be easy to battle this.
Yes, but the challenge really is building the database, building the information base. And I think that if we could advocate for every community to have a local council for the protection of children, could be the barangay council for the protection of children, or any local church community, for them to begin to do master list of all children in their respective communities and begin to do surveillance monitoring of what is happening to their children. Second, if only all communities would help each other to ensure that all their children are in school and stay in school.
So these are like part of the solution.
Then we are preventing a lot of problems when it comes to abuse, exploitation of children.
Pero sinasabi nila, parents din daw ang problema. Kasi, and this, we've heard this in the past, that parents admit, you know, we're so poor, we can't feed our own family, and so we're forced, yung pag nahuli na, yun yung sinasabi nila, we're forced to do this. Is that, I mean, Is poverty really the root of this problem?
Poverty is a structural factor.
Or is it an excuse?
It can be an excuse, but poverty counts. But poverty alone would not bring about such situation. Poverty coupled with other conditions like family breakdowns, dysfunctional families, the lack of access to education of children, the lack of gainful employment of parents. So there are interlocking factors that contribute to this phenomenon. That's why I think what is needed is to have multifaceted interventions, no? At the level of the child, at the level of the family, the level of the community, the level of the church, the school, the local government unit.
The law enforcers.
Law enforcers.
And our lawmakers.
Yes.
Now, we don't have, unfortunately, any person in Congress who represents the Filipino child.
We have
Kasi kausap,
congressmen
I
who
heard,
are-
I heard the interview kanina. Caroline Howard was speaking to Attorney Eric Malyonga, and according to Attorney Malyonga, there's nobody really in Congress that represents the Filipino child.
Well, what
There
I
are
know,
no party list
what
groups
I know
that-
is that parliamentarians from the Philippines participated in an international parliamentary union general assembly in Mexico City sometime in May of this year. The Senate President was supposed to have headed the Philippine delegation, but I think it was Senator Flavier instead of Senator Drilon who went to Mexico along with Congressman Nograles. In fact, Congressman Nograles delivered on behalf of the Senate President a paper on how the Philippine government, particularly the legislative branch, is trying to respond to phenomenon like this. No? But of course, things are said and done. No? We may have good policies, good laws, but the challenge is in consistent enforcement, effective enforcement.
I also want to get your thoughts on the role of media in this whole matter, but first we're going to have to take a break. Mr. Moselina, we'll still be talking to our guest, the Section Chief of the Child Protection of United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF. After the break, you're watching ANC. Welcome back to ANC News 8 p.m. We are still talking to the Section Chief of the Child Protection of UNICEF, Mr. Paul Moselina. And we were talking a while ago about, I asked you a while ago about media's role in this whole problem of child pornography.
The media has a very critical role in exposing issues of abuse, exploitation, and violence against children, and in properly reporting the situation and the realities of children. That's on the
side of the pro.
That's on the positive side.
Sa con.
On the other hand, media can be guilty of exploiting children as well. When children are made to appear as sexual objects in certain shows, for example. So there is a responsibility on the part of the mass media to treat the child with respect, with dignity as persons, and that is called for in the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Media has agreed to some form of code of conduct, in reporting on children or in exposing issues concerning children.
Well, I remember hearing Cito Beltran once give a short talk on this issue of the problems in media, the TV shows that are coming out today, and he says, yes, there are these issues out there, but where are the parents? They should be complaining about this. They should be coming out and fighting for their children by filing complaints. No, but we aren't seeing this. What we're seeing is parents and children lapping up what they see on TV. So I guess we're talking about the psychology of parents and children right now. What, in your experience, no, in child protection, what happens to the mind of a child, you know, like let's say one of these children rescued in this child pornography ring in Laguna.
Yeah. Well, it's possible that those children who have been victims of various forms of abuse and exploitation in their lives would consider participation in such activity as a form of survival strategy. That of course is a false consciousness.
So parang for them
being
this is
person.
normal. This is how I survive.
Well, they have been forced to survive in that way. It's even possible that some parents have encouraged them, because parents themselves are also victims of injustice, of poverty, suffering.
So it's safe to say
my point
that
is, if the children themselves are suffering, it may also be because their parents themselves are suffering. So it's really a mix of various factors.
So this only happens to poor people. Is that a safe
for the most part,
statement
for
to
the
make?
most part.
So mahihirap lang ang nagkaka-ganito.
Poor children are more vulnerable, I would say, given other factors equal.
Well, hearing what you've said, how do you rehabilitate these children? Is this part of UNICEF's work, rehabilitation?
What UNICEF does is we support the training of social workers and psychologists who are able to provide biopsychosocial help or psychosocial services to victims of abuse, exploitation, and violence. We also support the training even of law enforcement agencies, the police, the NBI agents, even prosecutors and judges, so that those children whose cases are brought to court are properly handled, using child-sensitive procedures.
Now, speaking of going to court, can the Philippines run to an international court in case we're dealing with an international ring of criminals?
I'm not very sure of that. I'm not a lawyer, but I know that there is an international court of justice already. But even without resort to an international court, there are enough legal and judicial remedies available in the country.
So we don't need new laws.
We
don't need new laws.
The opportunities here in terms of legal and judicial protection. All we have to push for is for the pillars of the justice system to be more proactive and be more sensitive to cases of children. And be consistent in the enforcement of laws.
Well, speaking of enforcement, have you seen any indications so far in the studies of UNICEF, in your observations, that law enforcers could be turning a blind eye to this problem?
That can happen, although
any proof?
We have a growing number of child-sensitive law enforcers. In fact, in most police stations now, you have what we call Women and Children's Protection Division desk. And we have supported the training of some of these police officers manning this desk in the police stations. So they are beginning to be more sensitive to cases of children, and they themselves are able to initiate activities that support street children, for example, have alternative forms of livelihood instead of being involved in drug pushing or in other antisocial activities. In Quezon City, there's a police station here in Camoning which has developed alternative forms of livelihood for street children.
And it's positive.
That's positive. There are also networks of faith-based organizations that have formed that have formed programs based at the parish level, at the level of local church communities. So they do their own surveillance and monitoring.
Well, it's good to hear that there are some efforts to fight this problem, and even Malacanang says it has been vigilant against combating this problem. What can you say about that?
That's good to know. Although, as I said earlier, enforcement remains a challenge. No? Enforcement of existing policies remains a challenge.
And presidential spokesperson Ignacio Buña says that although the government is addressing this problem, the cooperation of parents and the local community is imperative. He also said that this recent arrest of 70 children in Laguna, this was just an isolated case. Baka nga naman isolated case lang po.
Several reports in the past also show that this has been going on. I remember very clearly that even in the mid-80s, Laguna featured in a number of cases of children who were victims of pedophiles during that time. And in fact, it took civil society, including faith-based groups, that initiated the earlier responses in that province, leading to the formation of local councils for the protection of children. And it was at that stage when UNICEF, together with the Department of Social Welfare and Development, launched a national program on child protection. So UNICEF works closely with government as well as with non-government organizations, except that I think given the complexity of this situation, we need really to push further and expand partnerships and networks and begin to act at the community level. No? I think that's where abuse, violence, exploitation happens at the grassroots level, working with families and communities.
Okay, Mr. Moselina, we have on the line right now, we are joined by DSWD Region 4 Director Telsa Biolena. Welcome po to ANC.
Welcome and good evening.
Okay, Madam, we just want to know what happened to the 70 children rescued from a pornography ring in Laguna?
One is since some of the children go to school, immediately we return them to their parents. We endorse them to the barangay captain. And then our social workers have to coordinate with the school so that at least their class advisors would be alerted on what these minors have been doing. And also, just last August too, our social worker accompanied one of the minors for the preliminary investigation of the case at NBI. And we have also written the mayors of Dasmariñas, Cavite, and also in Silang, Cavite, so that at least they could follow up the cases of the minors and also with their parents.
Now, Madam, according to our guest here, si Mr. Leopoldo Moselina, he's with UNICEF, that this problem is growing. Sa DSWD, is this something that you know of? Is this something that has been a problem that's just all of a sudden, you know, it's actually just exploded in our faces right now?
In DSWD Region 4, I think it's the first case that we have, and NDI has to coordinate with us so that at least we could immediately respond to the cases of the minors.
So, marami na pong cases na ganito? O ngayon lang kayo nagkaroon ng ganitong problema?
There are cases, but it's not reported to us, or others, some of the informants would lack the necessary information.
Now, going back to these 70 children that were rescued, if they go to schools and if they were returned to their families, how do they end up in these in this pornographic ring in the first place? Were you able to interview them?
Yeah, actually, there are Filipino pimps who are involved. Some of them are living in their own community, and the parents are not aware that these pimps are involved in coordination or they have contacts with some of the foreigners who take pictures on these children.
So what you're saying is that these children voluntarily went to some house in Laguna and they allowed themselves to be photographed without their parents' knowledge?
Yeah, yes.
And then they earn money in the process?
Some of these children are from Leverisa and also in the Dakota, Harrison, Manila.
That is, yeah, that's in Manila.
Only a few are from Cavite.
Ah, so they like go to this place and then pinipicturean sila doon, tapos kumikita sila ng pera doon. Magkano ba yung, were you able to ask these children how much money they earned out of this?
Accordingly, some of them were promised to be paid 10,000 pesos for one posing.
And
the money was not given to them because of the entrapment.
Aha. Okay. Now, have you been able to interview their parents?
I think it's the local social worker who will do that.
Mm-hmm. So, these 70 children, are they all from needy families?
Most of them. Some of the adolescents from Dakota and Leverisa are from the depressed communities.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them have been exposed in the streets.
Mm-hmm. So only some of them? Are there any from middle class or well-to-do families?
Wala naman.
Wala naman.
Oo.
Mm-mm. Okay, so, well, thank you very much for joining us this evening, Director Felsa Biolana, and we wish you well as you try to help rehabilitate these children.
Yes, thank you. And in fact, we're going to have a meeting with all the resort owners in Laguna to orient them about Republic Act 7610 and to prevent this kind of pornographic activities.
Okay, marami pong salamat,
wala pong anuman.
Director Biolana.
Yeah.
Okay, so what did you think of that?
We always believe that DSWD has been concerned about the plight of children who are victims of abuse and violence. They may need support in terms of building the capacities.
So kulang talaga yung support?
Yes.
Kulang talaga.
There are not enough facilities to admit all these children.
Okay, well, we would like to thank the heroic efforts of the DSWD as well as UNICEF in protecting the Filipino child. And we'd like to thank you so much, Mr. Leopoldo Moselina, for joining us tonight and shedding some light on this issue. And we really need those statistics, sir, because that's important. If we want to battle this, if we want to fight this battle well, we need to be armed with those statistics. So we will be looking forward to that study to be released in September.
Yes, we'll provide you with the study. And thank you for being part of creating a protective environment for children.
Thank you very
We
much.
need that.
Okay, that will do it for my hour. I'm Joyce Burton Titular. Please don't go away. Bea Alonzo will have private conversations with Boya Bunda. Thanks for watching.